Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barakan bin Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So tonight we're going to look at two chapters from Kitab, at-Tawheed. The first one being chapter 61, which is the chapter which the Imam has entitled, rahimahullah ta'ala, Babu ma ja'a fil musawwirin, what is said regarding cartoonists and caricaturists. So basically what the Imam is talking about is what has been said regarding people who make pictures, as we're going to see, of animate objects. And those pictures could be one-dimensional, or they could be 2 or 3-dimensional pictures, like statues. And he is going to tell us what our religion says about that. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, why did the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala, mention this topic, or mention this chapter, mention this topic? What is its connection to at-Tawheed? And the answer is that the Imam, he mentioned this topic, the topic of picture making, image making, statue making, for two reasons. The first one is what the scholars of Islam refer to as al-mubahat. Al-mubahat means to imitate or to mimic. And so basically, when a person makes a picture of an animate object, something which could have a soul or has a soul, then they are, in a sense, they are mimicking or giving the appearance that they are doing something which only Allah can do, and that is to what? To create things that live, create things with souls. And so one of the reasons why this is related to at-Tawheed is because, as we know, at-Tawheed means it means singling out Allah in all of those things which are exclusive to Him. And one of those things is creation. Creating things from nothing, creating things that have souls and giving them life. And so it's not appropriate for man to try to imitate Allah in this exclusive quality, or to give the impression that he is imitating Allah or resembling Allah in this exclusive quality. That's number one. So that's the first reason the Imam mentioned it, because it's a violation of at-Tawheed in that sense. The second one is because picture making and statue making is a wasila min wasail ash-shirk. It is a conduit or a pathway that leads to idolatry. And if you guys remember, early on in the work, the Imam mentioned a chapter. He said, Babu ma ja'a anna sababa kufri bani Adam wa tarkihim dinahum huwa al-ghuluw fi salihin. He said, the chapter which clarifies that the reason that man disbelieved and abandoned his religion, the religion of Tawheed, is because he went overboard and was excessive in his glorifying the righteous people. And he mentioned in that chapter, he mentioned the Athar of Ibn Abbas, who mentioned about those 5 men from the people of Noah, and how they all died suddenly at the same time. And they were people who were very well respected, and they did lots of good deeds. And so the people were heartbroken by their loss. And so the shaitan came to them. He seized that opportunity and their grief as an opportunity to do what? To get them to do something which would ultimately lead them down the path of committing a shirk. And so what did he do? He inspired them to erect statues in their image, and to name those statues with their names. And every time they went, and to place those statues in what? In the town square, the city square, where those people would generally come and do good things, right? This way, when you go to that place, you'll see them, you'll remember their good deeds. This will calm your grief, and you'll also be inspired to do good the way they did. Which shows you that the shaitan, one of the ways that he gets us to do bad is to do what? To cloak it in the cloak of goodness, right? The cloak of righteousness. So they did that. And a generation passed, and that generation did not worship those statues. But once that generation passed and a new generation came, they didn't know why their forefathers had erected those statues. So the shaitan came back to them and said, do you know why your forefathers erected these statues? Kanu ya'budunaha. They used to worship them. So they did what? So they started worshiping them. And so what was the cause for the very first occurrence of polytheism, idolatry? It was picture making, statue making. You see that? And so this is another reason why the Imam brought this chapter, to show us that pictures and picture making is one of the wasa'il, one of the conduits, one of the pathways that lead to idolatry. And it's, okay, go ahead.
So that was the first instance of idolatry?
That was the first instance. In fact, Ibn Abbas, he prefaces his statement by saying that the first occurrence of a shirk, that from the time of Adam, for 10 generations, the people were upon a Tawheed. And shirk first appeared, and he mentions this athar. طيب. So basically, these are the two reasons that our religion has prohibited pictures and picture making of animate objects. And that is, one, because of al-mudahat, because of what it gives the appearance of imitating or competing with Allah in a quality which is exclusively His. The quality of what? Of creating. Particularly creating animate objects. Objects that what? That live and breathe and have souls, etc. And the second reason is because picture making and statue making is one of the conduits or pathways to a shirk. Now I just want to stress and emphasize that the picture making that Islam prohibits are the pictures of animate objects, things that have souls or could have souls, right? So for example, a person makes a statue or a picture of a human being, or they make a statue of a cow or an elephant or a horse. These are all things that what? That live and breathe and have souls. These are the things that Islam what? It prohibits us to make pictures of. But it doesn't prohibit us of making pictures of inanimate objects like clouds and mountains and bodies of water and foliage, plants like trees and flowers. These things were not prohibited from making pictures of them. In fact, there was a person during the time of Ibn Abbas, during the time of the early Muslims, who was a picture maker by trade. That's what he did for a living. And so when the knowledge of what Islam says about making pictures came to him, he came to Ibn Abbas and he said, this is my profession, it's my livelihood. I don't know how to put hand to mouth except by doing this. So Ibn Abbas, he said, in kuntu wala budda fa'ilan. He said, if you have no alternative but to be what? A picture maker, a person who is an artist, a caricaturist, a cartoonist. He said, فَفِي الشَّجَرِ وَالْحَجَرِ. Then make pictures of what? Of inanimate objects like trees and rocks and mountains and scenery, etc. طيب. So now, the prohibition of making and also possessing pictures of animate objects is something which is agreed upon by the scholars. And this agreement of the scholars has been transmitted by Ibn Abdul Barr, rahimahullahu ta'ala. And what the Imam does in this chapter, the chapter number 61, Babu Ma Ja'a fil Musawwirin, what the Imam does in that chapter is he gives us 5 religious texts, 5 hadith, which support this assertion that picture making and having or possessing pictures of animate objects is prohibited. And the first 4 hadith are related to that first reason or that first justification. What was the first justification? You guys remember? What was it? Yeah, remember we said there are 2 reasons why Islam prohibits picture making.
So because of the first 5 people to commit shirk.
Okay, so one of the reasons is because it's what? It's a conduit or a pathway to shirk. What was the other reason? What was the other reason? Okay, how does it violate Tawheed? Very good, but how does it violate Tawheed? At-Tawheed. What is at-Tawheed? Singling out Allah in everything which is exclusively His. Right? One of the things that is exclusively His, Jazakallah khair, Shaykh, Jazakallah khair. One of the things that is exclusively His is the ability to what? To create, specifically create animate objects, things that breathe and live and have souls, right? So the first 4 ahadith the Imam gives are ahadith which show what? Which highlight this reasoning or this basis. A hadith which show the reason why it's prohibited is because why? You're competing with Allah or giving the appearance of competing with Allah in something which is exclusively His. And then the last hadith is the one where he highlights the second of the 2 reasons, which is, it is wasila, it is a conduit or a pathway to a shirk. So if we look at the first hadith, which is the hadith of Abu Hurairah, radiyallahu anhu, we see that, he said, that the Messenger of Allah said, قال الله تعالى ومن أظلم ممن ذهب يخلق كخلقي فليخلق ذرة أو ليخلق حبة أو ليخلق شعيرة. So in this hadith, the first thing he said was that Allah the Exalted says, who is more unjust than the one who tries to create the like of my creatures? Who is more unjust? Who is more oppressive? Who is a greater wrongdoer than the one who tries to do what? To do as I do. To do as only what I can do. Tries to what? To compete with me. You guys see that? Tries to compete with me. Indicates that one of the reasons for this prohibition is what? Because it gives the appearance of competing with Allah in something which is exclusively His. Then he said, فَلْيَخْلُقُ ذَرَّةً أَوْ لَيَخْلُقُ حَبَّةً أَوْ لَيَخْلُقُ شَعِيرًا. Let him create a seed, let him create a grain, let him create a barley, corn. And so here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issues a challenge. Okay? Who is the one who tries to do as I do? Instead of doing that, let him what? Let him try to create a seed, a grain, a barley corn, a challenge. Meaning, try to do something what? Smaller. Less intricate, and which doesn't have what? A soul. Can man do it? He can't do it. He can't create something as small as that from nothing. Something as simplistic, comparatively speaking. Obviously, a grain compared to the human body, there's a huge difference, right? Between them in terms of what? Complexity. So Allah says, if you want to try to create something what? Which is much less than that. Instead of something which is greater than that, which will also invoke your Lord's anger, as we're going to see. So basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not saying that they can do that. They can't. But He's saying if they are going to try, let them make a more reasonable attempt, right? Let them make a more reasonable attempt again, because these things don't have what? Something which is very, very complicated, which is what? The soul, right? The soul. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك we come to the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu anha, and that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, أشد الناس عذابا يوم القيامة الذين يضاهئون بخلق الله. So first of all, she starts and says that the Prophet said, those who receive the severest punishment. Tells you that picture and statue making are major sins, right? Because the Prophet promised a punishment for the people who engage in it. Then she said that the Prophet said, يضاهئون بخلق الله. They try to make the like of what Allah created. They do what? They try to compete with Allah in something which is exclusively His. Again, underscoring the reason why picture making is prohibited. The reason why we don't draw pictures of people and elephants and horses and dogs and cats, which have souls, is because why? In this way we give the appearance that we're competing with Allah in something which is exclusively His. Then the hadith of Ibn Abbas, there are actually two of them, two versions of the hadith, which are similar. The first one says, كل مصور في النار يجعل له بكل صورة صورها نفس يعذب بها في جهنم. All the picture makers will be in the fire of hell. A soul will be breathed in every picture, prepared by him, and it shall punish him in hell. The second version of the hadith says, من صور صورة في الدنيا كلف أن ينفخ فيها الروح وليس بنافخ. So he said, whoever makes a picture in this world will be charged with putting a soul, putting life in it, and he will never be able to do it. طيب, so here you'll notice that in both cases the punishment in the hellfire is being charged with breathing a soul into the object that they what? That they drew or shaped or carved or crafted in this world. Lets you know that the things that we're prohibited from making are the things that could have what? Souls. A person didn't draw a tree and then is told to what? Breathe a soul into it. Because are there souls in trees now? No, they're not. You guys see that? And so it's in this way, the Prophet is clarifying, these are the types of images and pictures and statues we're prohibited to what? To make. طيب, then last but not least, Hadith Ali radiallahu anhu. This is the one which specifically speaks to the second reason why it's prohibited. And that is that it can lead to what? A shirk. So he says, ألا أبعثك على ما بعثني عليه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ألا تدع سورة إلا طمستها ولا قبرا مشرفا إلا سويته. So he said in this hadith, should I not depute you on a mission on which I was sent by Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is deface all picture that you come across and level every raised grave to the earth. Now, why would the Prophet order him to level every raised grave, you think?
What does it mean to say?
طيب, a raised grave, right? A grave which what? Has a huge mound, which can easily be identified as what? As a grave. Or even worse, a grave which has what? Some type of building erected over, like a tomb, right? Like a tomb. Why would the Prophet say level that? Make it level with the earth.
I don't know.
Okay, let me ask you this question.
No, you know why I said I don't know? Because in Tunisia, all our cemetery, they raise it.
Okay, so now
and they put the thing that for water and for to put sha'ir for the bird.
Okay.
And they put behind some flower.
Okay.
And it's Bilad Muslim.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this.
I don't understand.
Now, are you guys familiar that in some places in the Muslim world and even in the non-Muslim world, they have something called shrines?
Yeah.
Places where certain famous people or certain people who are considered holy or pious
So in
are
Indian
buried.
subcontinent there are a lot.
There are a lot of them. And do people go there?
Yeah.
People
But
go there?
Not majority. But people go
But people go there. And when they go there, what do they do?
So yeah, they do the shirk.
They do shirk. So let me ask you a question. If there was this famous pious person that people felt like there's some blessing and some barakah in being in his presence, and if I'm in his presence and I ask him to make dua for me, or I make certain offerings to him to draw close to him, then he will intercede on my behalf. If a person had this in their mind, but they didn't know where his grave was, because all the graves are what? Level to the ground. And there's nothing that specifically identifies the grave of this person or makes it look significantly different or more identifiable than what? Than other graves. That limits what? That minimizes the likelihood of what? Of a shirk. You see that? So in this way, the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentions these two things together, أَلَّا تَدَعْ سُورَةً إِلَّا طَمَسْتَهَا, that you don't leave an image except that you what? You deface it. Right? And you don't leave a grave except that you what? You level it to the earth. It means that the Prophet is saying, why am I asking you to do this? To minimize the likelihood of people committing a shirk. La siyama, especially when you consider that the first act of polytheism, the first act of idolatry happened because of what? The making of images. Mumtaz. All right. And so this hadith also teaches another thing. The pictures of animate objects that are prohibited are those which are untainted or unblemished. But what if a picture of a living thing was defaced? What if it was disfigured? What if it was distorted? For example, let's say, you had a statue of a human being, and you hit it with a hammer, and it knocked off what? The head, the neck, and part of the shoulder. So what was left was what? The shoulder, part of the chest, and then what? The remainder of the body. That statue, because it's been what? Defaced, is no longer what? Prohibited in the deen of Allah. You have, for example, a picture of a human being, and you do what? You put a line through it, right? Or you do something else to what? To deface it. Then that makes it what? No longer a threat, and no longer something which will have the negative spiritual effects of a picture which is unblemished or untainted. And one of the evidences is obviously the hadith of Ali. Don't leave a picture except that you what? Deface it. But also we have the famous hadith. One version of it was collected by Ibn Majah, the other version by Abu Dawood, and there are also similar narrations with less particular details in Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, or Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions that she, during the Prophet's absence, he went off on an expedition or some type of journey, and she hung a curtain in her home over the front door that had pictures on it. Pictures of what? Some type of animate object. And I believe some of the commentators, they said that it was a picture of a horse with what? With wings. Okay? So she had this curtain just to decorate the home. And she hung it over what? Over the front door. So when the Prophet came and saw the curtain, he didn't enter the home. And the version of Bukhari, his face became red because that's how people knew he was angry. He wasn't the type of person who would throw things, who would kick things, who would yell and scream. But you could see anger on what? On his face. So Aisha, when she saw the anger on his face, she asked him what was wrong. And ultimately the Prophet ﷺ did what? He pulled down the curtain and she understood that it was what? It was the curtain. So she explains in the version of Abu Dawood, she says, فَقَطَعْتُهَا. She said, so I took the curtain, I did what? I cut it into pieces and then I made, from those pieces I made pillows. And I filled it with what? With palm fiber. And the Prophet ﷺ used to recline on those pillows, and she said in the hadith of Abu Dawood, she said, فَلَمْ يُنْكِرْ ذَلِكَ عَلَيَّ. And the Prophet did not what? Disapprove of that from me. Meaning that when she cut that curtain, and part of it would have what? The head. Another part would have what? A wing. Another part would have what? The hoof. You see that? And they were all over the place, and none of it was what? A whole body. That was what? That was deemed acceptable. And so if a picture is defaced, that's acceptable. But if a picture is whole and it's a picture of something which could have a soul, then that's unacceptable. Until it's what? Until it's defaced or disfigured or distorted. Right. Any questions about that before we go to chapter 62? Many questions. Many.
Many, but
Okay, let's hear them. Let's do it.
What's your opinion about, like we say, and I am convinced and I'm listening, I'm not disapproving what in the book or what you just announced.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to have a driver license or a passport,
Hey.
they ask you to take a picture.
Mumtaz.
So what is the outcome of that?
Okay, there's a couple things there. The first one is the difference between what we call rasm, as-surah, was-surah al-photography, right? So the difference between a picture which is drawn and a picture which is the result of a photograph. So that's one thing. The scholars differ about the permissibility of photographic images, because they say in photography you are not actually drawing and competing with Allah's creation, but in fact the photograph is just a reflection of what? Of what Allah has created. That's the first thing. The second thing is that even if we were to argue that even photography is included in what? In the prohibition, there would definitely be exceptions for what? Darura, for necessity. And so, for example, passports and driver's license are things that in today's world you can't function without them. Similarly, if a person goes to work and they have a special ID badge that you have to get access to where you work, okay? Those are darurat, okay? And also the principle that the scholars of Islam have mentioned is that whenever something is prohibited, saddan lid-dhari'ah, it's prohibited to not because it itself is bad, but because it can lead to something bad. It will be permitted in cases of what? Of necessity. And so pictures, as we said, one of the reasons they're prohibited is not because they themselves are bad, but because they lead to something bad, which is idolatry. And so if there's a necessity, if there's a genuine need, like for example having money, cash which has what? These dead presidents on it, right? Faces on it. Similarly a passport, a driver's license, an ID badge to get access to work. Those are exceptions to the rule. They're exceptions to the rule. Whereas the drawing of things,
So
unnecessarily.
we are not, it's not permitted to carry the bills or the...
No, I'm saying it is, because how would you function in most societies? I don't know. This, at least the places I've been, the money has pictures of people on it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to give me all your bills.
Exactly. So again, if it's a necessity, if it's a genuine need,
Okay.
that will be pardoned. It will be excused.
The next question, the photography. Like, for example, my father, when he passed away, one of the things that my family did, there was a kid that they take a picture and put it in a frame.
Mm-hmm.
And put it in a wall in the living
Hey.
room. So my grandmother, so my grandfather, it was like just to
Hey.
memories.
Yeah. طيب.
Is that halal? Is that haram? Is that munkar? Is that
Okay, remember a couple things. Number one is that even if we say that photography would not violate the first one, which is mudahat, which is competing, because we said it's just what? A reflection. If we post it on a wall, it could potentially violate and put us in the crosshairs of the second one, which is wasila and wasail, shirk. Because when you put that picture there, why are you putting it there? And what feelings does it invoke?
just to remember
Eh.
father or remember grandfather?
Or just to remember them?
Just to remember.
And is that the only way you can remember them? Because could you potentially tu'adhimuhum? Could you potentially revere them? Could potentially exalt them, especially with their picture what? Posted in that sense. Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you could. Because what happened to the people of Nuh?
Grandkids.
Yeah, they put those pictures there and people did what? They went from just trying to remember them, remember that. When it was first put there, it was just to what? To remember them and remember their deeds. And then it went from that to what? To actually worshiping them. And so this has that potential.
Once again, I agree with you. I'm not debating that or
Yeah.
anything like that or opposing. But I am relating to you the fact.
And I'm responding. I'm not criticizing you. I'm responding to the question. It's like if we put the pictures up there and we put them up there, why are we putting them up there? And then there's another point that I'll come to that Hamza kind of alluded to. So the first one is why are we putting them up there? You said to remember. That's the same thing the people of Nuh did, just to remember. And ultimately time passed and people went from remembering them to worshiping them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, he said that لا تدخل الملائكة بيتا فيه تساوير. He said the angels do not enter a house in which there's what? A picture. And so if we're going to have pictures, we should have the pictures in a place that's what? It's not open. We shouldn't have the pictures on the wall. Let's say, for example, a person had, and I'm not saying we should do this, but a person had, for example, a picture album, right? People do this, right? They have like a scrapbook and have a bunch of like pictures in it. And those pictures might go back generations, right? They might have pictures of their grandfather from the 1800s, great-great-grandfather from the 1800s, right? Okay, but it's a what? It's in a book that they put in the trunk and it's locked away. That's very different from what? From having it posted, and that will do what? That will prevent the angels from entering. Which angels? The angels that go and make dua for the believers, that bring the barakah and bring the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the angels who will not come into your home if you have what? If you have these pictures and they're out in the open. And so for that reason, those two reasons, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. Even if it's a photographic picture.
My next question about the cemetery, go back to the cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
The qubur, how you say qubur?
Graveyard.
The graveyard.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen any in a Muslim country?
Have I seen graves? Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all of them level?
Well, what they do is they have them slightly raised, like a little mound. But it's not a large mound. And that's only so people don't step on it. Because if they had it completely level to the ground, then people would actually step on people's graves and they would be disrespecting the graves. But as far as having this huge mound, or even worse, having some type of what? Structure. Structure. No. That shouldn't be. That shouldn't
Like
be.
in our countries,
How about they put even in the marble?
Uh-huh.
They put the name and they put some verses of the Quran. I remember until now I can read even the surah
Yeah.
that was put on my father's graveyard.
Okay. Yeah, we're not supposed to do tombstones. And we shouldn't do anything which is extravagant or elaborate, like marble. And we definitely shouldn't put Quran.
so not really like tombstone. It's say for example in our country it's prevalent like it's quite rectangular.
Is it in the ground?
Huh?
Do they put it in the ground?
On the ground.
On the ground?
Above the ground.
Above the ground.
Like it's flat though.
So maybe 1.5 hand. Yeah.
Okay, is it something like this?
It's built up.
It's about
Almost like a brick.
Yeah.
It's built
Yeah,
up.
so
That's
like
what they do,
like
yeah.
this, like this,
About
like
the
this.
foot.
So
Ah,
here
okay,
is-
wait. So you're talking about, okay, here's the grave,
rectangle.
that huge rectangle, and there's a slab of cement or something
No,
covering the
there is
whole
no
rectangle.
slab on top. On top it's normally open, mostly
Okay.
open. Yeah. I
Uh-huh.
would say. Mostly. Maybe there are some
Hey.
little slabs, but
Mhm.
normally on top it's open. But around, I mean, rectangular. There is rectangular. Like,
Almost like a fence. Is
yeah.
that it?
Yes. Yeah.
How built up is it?
It's the brickwork.
So just maybe one block,
One.
and they
brick,
go
yes.
around like that.
Yeah.
But it's not tall.
So like.
Can you
as
take a
as
picture,
say-
bring us?
About the height of
I
a
mean,
cinder
why?
block.
So like this. So from ground,
Oh,
like
that's high.
One
Wow, that's
foot.
too high. That's too high.
One
Yeah.
foot. One
Mm-mm,
foot,
it shouldn't be.
I think I
Well,
saw
I've heard all we're supposed to do is have something
Can
to
you have
mark
somebody-
with it.
Exactly. Some.
Not
Yeah,
even-
that's it. You should have a tombstone or anything like that.
This is significant to show the head is there.
That's it. It should be
Nothing written,
as
no
as
dates,
as
no-
simple as possible. And like you said, if there has to be some writing, it should be minimal. So, for example, I might say lot 28. So I know this is where my relative, my loved one is buried. But all the things that people do, for example, they write Quran. Yeah, the graveyard is not the place for the Quran. It's not the place for the Quran. It's not. So we shouldn't write Quran on the tombstones. And you have to think too, who had a closer relationship with the Quran than Rasulullah sallallahu and his companions? Who loved the Quran more? And who had more knowledge of the Sunnah and the best way to respect and honor the deceased? And they didn't do that. They didn't put Quran on anything. They didn't build up the graves. In fact, the Prophet told Ali and he told others, let me depute you to do this duty or to carry out this duty that the Prophet deputed me to carry out. أَلَّا تَدَعْ سُورَةً إِلَّا طَمَسْتَهَا وَلَا قَبْرًا مُشْرِفًا إِلَّا سَوَّيْتَهُ. So he told
I'm
them.
going to Tunisia. All my relatives
Eh.
are gonna Saafiy.
So I mean, and don't be surprised.
Brother with me, right?
And don't be surprised.
All of them did.
And don't be surprised. You say, well, it's so common in the Muslim world to do the opposite. The Prophet ﷺ foretold. He said, "Inna al-Islam bada ghariban wa sayudu ghariban kama bada. Fatuba lil-ghuraba." He said, Islam began as something strange, odd. It stuck out like a green thumb, right? It just didn't fit. It was a square peg that was being put in a round hole. It just didn't fit. And it became what? Common, right? It became the norm. It became orthodox. He said, time will come when what? It will return to being what? Strange and odd. And this is the time that we're living in. That if a person said graves should be level, people were like, what are you talking about? That you don't even find that in our countries. That doesn't mean that it's not the right thing. It just means that we've what? We've drifted so far away from our religion. Yeah, we've drifted so far away from our religion and from the basic teachings. And again, we all are aware that in Muslim dominant countries and non-Muslim dominant countries, the worship of shrines is something what?
Shrine,
It's very
you say?
common. Yeah, shrines. People
How
go
we say the
in
shrine
Arabic. What would they say?
How we spell shrine?
Majar.
No. In Arabic we'd say.
I'm not joking. No, I'm not.
S-H-R-I-N-E.
I'm not joking.
يعني
I know.
المقابر.
How you spell this?
But there's a word in
How
Arabic
you
that they
spell
shrine
shrine?
shrine. I'm trying to think of the word bil Arabi that we use, and it's not coming to me right now. But
Like Buddha, the statue, but a shrine could be somebody's grave.
man, I'm trying to
Go
think.
and commit shirk, they ask them for stuff and make dua to them.
Yeah, even in Iraq also there are a lot of shrines.
Yeah,
And
I can't think of the name right now.
Brother,
And
Abdullah,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
the people who more wealthy, when they have a death,
Mm-hmm.
you know the word rawda.
Rawda.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like they make like fancy metal, like their own.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, inside the cemetery is their
Yeah.
own space.
Yeah.
Or they'll build,
Wallah.
You buy the land.
or they'll build up something.
Put a fence and so, whoa, Mr. Bashir.
Adriha.
Oh,
Adriha.
other.
Adriha. That's it. Adriha. That's the word. It finally came to me. Adriha. Hey.
I'm gonna forget it.
Yani we live for sure.
Shrine.
You have to repeat 10 times.
Yeah, ضريح أضرحة. Yeah. So basically, yeah, this is again, but the fact that it's common in Muslim dominant countries should not shock us because there's so many things that are common in Muslim dominant countries.
Different civilization like that came through after the Islam,
Mm-hmm.
and you find I don't know 2-3% of Jews coming across, of course,
Mm-hmm.
5-8% of Christian, and people that they don't believe on anything or they don't practice on anything.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, okay.
And all of that, people get influenced. That's the other thing too, that the Prophet ﷺ discouraged the Muslims from traveling to the lands of non-Muslims, living amongst them, and discouraged us from, being too close to the non-Muslims or imitating them. Why? Because pretty soon you get confused, you get mixed up, and their cultures and their beliefs and their practices begin to do what? Begin to dominate and overcome, especially if they're in positions of what? Of power. Because people tend to succumb to the culture of the conqueror. And so all those things kind of have affected the Muslims, and this is where we are. This is where we are. So I'll give you an example. What does our religion say about women covering? The what they call hijab al-mar al-muslima, the dress of the Muslim woman.
That's another.
Yeah, but if you go to many Muslim dominant countries, you'll find women what?
Tunisia.
Yeah, women are not wearing anything,
Welcome
and
to
they're dressing sometimes worse than Western women.
Welcome
And
to
then
Tunisia.
somebody say, well, if you said a woman is supposed to dress like this, some people are like, no, that can't be the case because women don't wear that in my country, right? Again, Islam began as something strange, as it returned to something strange. The fact that people don't do it doesn't make it not the truth. It just shows how far we've deviated from the
Brother
truth.
Abdullah,
Yes, sir.
welcome to Tunisia. My colleague, a lady,
Uh-huh.
she was wearing hijab.
Mm-hmm.
The director, every time he see her, he send her home.
Yeah.
She be crying and she go home.
I had a friend,
Yeah,
I'm not sure if he
yeah.
was from...
This is like, let's say, dominance. What they call it, dominance. The director, the ignorant people in power. It's your director.
Yeah, I remember I had a guy I met when I was overseas. I'm not sure if he was from Algeria or if he was from Tunisia.
The same thing.
And he said, yeah, but I'm not sure which
It's the same
country.
in Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt. We live in the
North
same
Africa.
problem.
I'm not sure which country it was, but he basically said that where he was from, if a girl went out in the street, just in the street, so she's not going to a school, a government school where she's getting free tuition, and so she has to follow their rules, whatever those might be, but she just leaves her house to go get bread. If she was found in the street, she could be arrested. And when they would take her for wearing hijab, it's a crime.
Okay.
Yeah. And if she would go to the police station and they wouldn't book her or throw her in jail, they would find out who was she related to. For example, who's her father or her uncle or whoever who's responsible for her. They would make that person come and scold her in front of them. Basically, you're a bad girl. Why are you doing that? That's not right. We don't do that, and so on and so forth. So there's two things wrong with that picture. One is that they're making a crime and they're making him tell her it's a crime. You see that? Making him say something which basically goes against our religion and is actually, if he says that wearing hijab is a crime, it's disbelief. It's disbelief. You see that? And they make him say that. That's
so
just...
the child become very confused. Plus, you add to that the scale.
And you're humiliating him. You're humiliating him in front of his child. So she loses all respect for him. It's so many layers of psychological warfare happening. Yeah.
The next step will be extremely very quick.
Allah
You have
musta'an.
no idea.
I
You have no idea.
about the children drawing images and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Stick men, they can't draw,
Mm-hmm.
so it's far from perfect.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I don't know the words you use, but tainted but it's nowhere near perfect.
Right.
I always tell my kids don't draw images and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what say you about that?
Yeah, if it's a stick figure, and things like that, which
Coloring.
they don't have souls. A stick figure can't have souls. It doesn't even really resemble a real human being.
Try to draw a horse or an elephant, you know.
No.
If they draw it in a way which is not realistic, and one of the proofs for that is that Aisha radiallahu anha, and this also leads to a debate amongst the scholars about dolls and toys for girls specifically. So at any rate, Aisha radiallahu anha, as you know, when the Prophet first married her, she was very young. And so she still, although she was a woman when they consummated, she was basically biologically a woman. She was still very young and still had a lot of girlish tendencies. And she liked to play like girls like to play. And that included playing with dolls. And so one time the Prophet ﷺ, he came to visit her, and she had these like little primitive dolls that they would make during that time, which were made of the primitive materials that they had. So basically, it might be palm fibers, it might be thread and string, and it doesn't really look like what we would consider like a Barbie doll, right? But it's supposed to be a doll. And so she had these like little figures made of these primitive materials, and she was playing with them, and the Prophet came and he kind of laughed and said, well, what is this? And she said, no, she said, I'm playing. He said, well, what are you playing? These are my dolls. These are my friends. And he said, okay, well, what are these dolls? And she said, I'm playing Solomon's horses, right? And he said, I didn't know Solomon had a horse or something like that. He laughed about it. And so the scholars of Islam, they have this debate about whether or not dolls, especially dolls the way that we know dolls now, are permissible or not. Some of them say that they are, irrespective of how advanced and how human-like they look. And some of them say no, it was permitted because of what? Because they were so primitive, they didn't even look like, right, what we would consider a human to look like. Right, yeah, whatever they did. And so if we go with the second opinion, then that would cover definitely what you're talking about. And even if we go with the first opinion, because again, a stick figure, because of its primitive nature, because of the unrealisticness of the image, it would not constitute or fall into the category of that which is prohibited. So basically, stick figures, they're humble attempts to draw a horse, and the horse is basically a stick figure that you say, I don't know if that's a dog or a horse. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, it's not a problem. But when they start to actually draw,
and they get good at it.
This is where we have to caution them and say, no, don't draw that, draw this.
Not to draw images. So
exactly.
I was never good at anything. It was like, so we would have like the stick figure with no
exactly.
face.
Again, that's another thing too. A human with no face, with no nose, with no eyes, with no mouth, could they live? Could they have a soul? And so these are the things we're talking about, images that could actually what? Could actually have a soul. So let's say, for example, a child drew a head, a very, age-appropriate head, but it was just a head. A head without a body can't bear what? A soul. So they all fall into what? To the acceptable or exceptional, the exceptions to the rule. That's one thing. And the other thing is that some of the scholars, again, because of the whole concept of Aisha having dolls, and one of the wisdoms that they say behind girls being allowed to have dolls is because it's a teaching mechanism to bring out of them the characteristics and qualities of motherhood and mothering, right? So if that's argued, that leads to what? Another argument, which is what? That if it is done, drawing or whatever, if it is done as what? As a teaching tool. As a teaching tool, it would also be what? Permitted. Again, because of the benefit outweighing the harm, and because if it's just done for teaching, then it doesn't fall into that category of being what? A wasila, a means that leads to the end of a shirk. And so these are all some like the exceptional cases, but obviously the exception shouldn't become the rule, right? And so without any necessity, without any need, we're just what? We're drawing things and coloring things and hanging things, and no, we shouldn't be doing that. Yeah.
So another
Kitab at-Tawheed, when it came out?
Man, you got to figure that Muhammad al-Wahhab, he probably lived in what,
So it's a long time, like century after the Prophet?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I want to say like
Started, you said 4 generations.
1500s or something like that. 1600s, I think. I'd have to look and find the exact
You were saying how none
time
of the
frame.
generations before him had no problem with it. And
Oh, no. I mean, his book, he did a lot of what the early Muslims did, but he did it in a way which is very, very simple, direct, and accessible. Much more simple, direct, and accessible than some of the early works on the same topic. But I'd say let me double check, but we're talking about, I think 1500s too early. I think it's more like 1700s. It's like 1700s if we're going to put it in Gregorian times. Yeah, I'd say that's probably when Muhammad al-Wahhab wrote this book.
One more question, and I'm
Yeah.
not shorting your time or taking you to another subject, but
Mhm.
I'm still remaining serious.
Mm-hmm.
You said the word Solomon at some point. You remind me we have a discussion a couple of days ago about the Solomon, Sayyidina Sulaiman.
Sulaiman.
Is that right?
Sallallahu
Do you
alaihi
have any brief knowledge like that Sayyidina Sulaiman, the Jews,
Mm-hmm.
they consider it's like their spiritual father? Or
Mm-hmm.
is that right on how?
Well, obviously, most of these prophets that we know in the Quran, most of them would be considered the Jewish prophets. Most of them would be considered the Jewish prophets. And that doesn't necessarily give them any superiority, nor does it somehow depreciate their value as
Sayyidina
prophets.
Sulaiman, he came after Musa or before?
After Musa, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they consider him Jewish.
Oh, definitely. He's one of the Jewish
Because
prophets,
we
yeah.
had a discussion about the Masjid al-Aqsa.
Mm-hmm.
The Jews, they try to destroy.
A'udhu billah. Yeah.
No, very much they're gonna do it.
No, I didn't
It's like they
yeah.
kill Arafat.
Yeah.
They're gonna do it anytime, we like it or not. They are waiting for the opportunity.
Allah understand what they took long.
Yeah, they are waiting for an opportunity. So the reason why I asked we had this discussion because they been reporting that Sayyidina Sulaiman
Mm-hmm.
he has like a temple for the Jews underneath the Masjid al-Aqsa.
Uh-huh.
That's their belief. But they don't have any proof for that anyway.
Well, that's the same way that they say that
So Sayyidina Sulaiman is considered as Jewish? Is that what
he's one of the Jewish prophets. I mean, that's the best way I can say it in modern terms. So basically, he followed the Sharia of Musa, right?
Mhm.
And he was a prophet king and a messenger, right? But he followed that same tradition. He was in that same line. And you have to figure that starting from Musa all the way up to Isa, they all followed what? That same tradition. Yeah. So you got to figure Dawood and Sulaiman are before what? Isa.
Mhm.
And Isa is still following what? That tradition of Musa. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So all of the prophets in between Musa and Isa are what? They're from that tradition. Yeah, they're from that tradition. At least the ones that we know in the
They
Quran.
refer, yeah. Uh-huh.
The ones that we know in the Quran, yeah.
There's some more in the Torah or in the Evangel. Or
I mean, obviously, we know that there are many prophets that we don't know because the Prophet ﷺ was asked, how many prophets were there? And he said 140,000. And he said, and from them, 313 were messengers. And so there are many that we don't know. And in the Quran only mentions, I think, about 25. Yeah. And among them are those prophets, Musa, Dawood, Sulaiman, and Isa, who were from what? From that tradition.
they have a reseller.
Well, obviously, Isa has his own Risala, which is the Injil.
Isa,
But Dawood had the Psalms. But as far as the Sharia, his Sharia was the Sharia of what? Of Musa.
Mhm.
And I don't believe Sulaiman, at least to my knowledge, doesn't have a book of his own. So he followed what? The Sharia of Musa.
Is there anywhere in this world on the
Mhm.
planet we can see Suhuf Musa? Or the Suhuf of
Not that I
Isa?
know of. Not that I know of.
No, they never been kept anywhere.
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah.
Barakallah fiik. Any other questions, Ya Akhwan?
Yeah, last question.
Uh-huh.
Like, since after arrival of mobile phone, the photography has become like widespread.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know there are like high level of photographer who takes photo. If we talk about the average people, like say takes photo average of lowest,
Mm-hmm.
what about them? I mean, is it prohibited, or I mean, as compared to the topics you're talking?
So you're saying they take pictures
For
of.
occasions and
Mhm.
this kind of thing, not too much of it.
Well, again,
But it's not basically exclusively for the necessity.
mhm.
Like for Eid occasion, they go and take some pictures.
You
Yeah,
can take a
something
picture
like
with
that.
your phone.
Yeah.
You have one camera.
Yeah.
So to be honest with you, obviously there's the debate about photography anyway.
Mhm.
But even if we have that debate about photography, pictures, because they are something which are frowned upon and because they do present a danger,
Mhm.
we should minimize.
Yeah.
And yeah, because of the phones
Mhm.
and because of so many other things, pictures have become something which even we as Muslims,
Mhm.
we're commonly taking a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful with that because again, pictures, even if they are photographic and we say they're not really competing because they're a reflection of what Allah created, they still present that other danger, which is wasilam and wasa'il, ash-shirk. They also present the danger of what? Of being something which can prevent the angels from coming into your home.
Mhm.
And they also can be something which is something I think a lot of people don't think about, is that when people generally they do these pictures, what do they do with those pictures?
Nothing. Keep it in the moment.
That's what some people do. A lot of people do what? They post it on their social media,
Oh, okay.
right? And so that opens them up to something else, which a lot of people don't think about, which is the evil eye,
Mhm.
right? The evil eye of jealousy. And so people will go to a restaurant and they're like yucking up with all their friends and there's exotic drinks that they're drinking, nothing alcoholic, right? Okay. But they're drinking exotic drinks and they have these great meals, right? And they're like, oh, look at this huge crab that we're eating or whatever. And they're sitting to someone who is struggling just to put bread on the table. See that?
Yeah.
And that person sees that. And even if they have good intentions, they might even try to be happy for the person, but there's what? There is some jealousy. There is some envy,
Yeah.
right? And that person can afflict that other person with the evil eye. So that's another thing that we have to really be considerate of. And I think a lot of us aren't considerate of it. Okay, and people are quick to go and post that they're doing this, and they went on this vacation, they're doing this, and they saw this, and they ate this, and they, and so that's another thing we have to consider as it relates to these photographic images. I'm trying to think. There was one other thing I wanted to say about that. But again, like I
How
said,
you say
so
the word the Futuhat al-Islamiyya? You know,
the Islamic conquests,
conquest.
yeah.
We need to go back to North Africa and the Middle East and do Futuhat.
We have to get our we have to get our faith up. We're not in a position spiritually.
Do it right here, bro.
We can't even have victories in our own homes, man. Yeah, we can't even have victories in our own homes, man. Yeah.
It's trying to conquer,
Yeah, but okay, to summarize, so this one exactly doesn't fall in the same category like drawing the picture.
No, it doesn't, because again, what the scholars argue, who have looked at the science of it, is that you are not competing with Allah in creating anything. The photograph is a reflection of what He created. That doesn't negate the fact that it shouldn't be something that we put, on a wall, posted or anything like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that doesn't negate that. And again, pictures are something, we should minimize. We should minimize. There's a necessity for it. And it's one of those things that as a person, for example, who leads a household, you don't want to be too hard on people in your household, whether it's your kids or your wife, etc., about things like this where there is some room, there is some debate. At the same time, it's important for all of us to try our best to understand what our religion says about pictures, why it warns us against pictures, and then to have a certain sense of what? A certain sense of a tahammush. How would you say that? Tahammush, how would you say that in English?
Tahammush.
Yeah.
like vulgarize something?
I guess that's not bad. It's like you just feel like, yeah, this is just not something that's just okay.
Yeah.
That we just open the floodgates and just do it freely. We have to be what? There has to be a little care and a little sensitivity, etc. It shouldn't be just like it's no different from eating peanuts. It's not. No, it is something. There is something there, and we should act like it.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. That's the balance that we have to kind of strike, and not just be the
And
people who are
back
just
home-
taking pictures of everything. Yeah.
Back home, we do here. There's the picture is makruh,
Mm-hmm.
but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all what you're gonna do.
That's
The next hour you see somebody posting a picture.
Yeah, because makruh for a lot of people doesn't mean anything.
it means
Yeah.
halal.
Exactly. It means it's not haram. Not haram. Not haram.
Exactly what they, yeah.
No, for real, no, seriously.
No, I'm
Allah
telling you, that's
Alim
my
will
clue.
leave
I
in,
mean, dislike.
That's what makruh has become. Yeah.
So it's like, all right.
Yeah, but before 2000, I would say the picture era was
Yani,
different.
from the
After
cemetery
2000.
to the picture to the habit.
No, but I mean, I have relatives
dress.
that I can't take pictures of their babies because they're husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And if I accidentally get, or if somebody in my family accidentally gets a picture,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost a problem.
Wow.
You know, but
Yeah.
they'll chase that person down and make sure at the very least that that person understands how serious their husband is about it.
Mm-hmm.
That it cannot leak in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
You know, and that's at minimum. If
Right.
not, can you please delete
What
it?
Delete the picture. Yeah.
Because
You cannot take picture of his child.
of nieces and nephews, and
You cannot.
I'm
I'm
saying
asking you. You cannot.
So to be
It's
on the safe
debated.
side, no.
it's something that you should be careful from.
Yeah, to be on
Right?
the safe
Even
side.
if you just, okay, this is the picture or the reflection of Allah's creation, so I'm not competing with Allah, it's just a picture. But let's say it's your daughter,
Uh-huh.
but somebody see that picture and they say how cute without saying mashallah, you know, so they give her the evil eye,
Yeah.
right? So the picture is a danger in the picture.
Mashallah is also evil eye or saving from the evil eye? Mashallah.
I mean,
No, what we say actually is we say Allahumma barik.
Yeah.
So basically, the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the one hadith, basically what means that if you see something that impresses you, that your brother has, or something about your brother, then protect him from the evil eye by saying, bit-tabrik, Allahumma barik, oh Allah, bestow your blessings, all right, or something like this.
What about mashallah?
No, not mashallah, because that's not what the Prophet said. So it's very common that people say mashallah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
because
the
in
Prophet
our
specifically said, at-tabrik, Allahumma
I
barik.
think people
Hey.
use mashallah in that sense, like mashallah.
I definitely
that-
have.
But that's the same
Hey.
thing. It goes in the same
So
line.
do you have to
That
say
one
both?
word-
No, what
Or one or the other?
if the Prophet ﷺ is the one who has given this knowledge by Allah of how to what? How to repel it. This is the shield. And this is the shield he gave us. And you barik. Oh, bit-tabrik. So you say Allahumma barik, right? Allahumma barik. Yeah. And if you do that, that will do what? That will hopefully, bidnillah, will repel the evil eye. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.